Hey everybody, welcome to Truth Be Told. Thank you very much for listening in. I really appreciate you being here. Today we're going to be talking about the Sons of Korah, and I think this is a really fascinating part of the Bible, a fascinating group of people to study. And the reason I think that is because we don't have like one cohesive story. There's no one place we can go to in Scripture to find out all about this family or this story that kind of surrounds this family. Instead, we get like this trail of breadcrumbs starting in Numbers 16 and kind of going all throughout the rest of the Old Testament. We see this lineage and where they start and where they kind of go through the things that they go through in the middle of their story and also where they get to in the end. But it's not ever the central part of any story. They almost act like footnotes or outliers to the story, but you can kind of do some cool detective work to find out, what happened to them? Who are these people? And why are they mentioned so many times all throughout? And I think it's really interesting that they are kind of on the outskirts of the story because that also was a big role that they took on. So we're going to learn more about that in just a second. But like I said, their story by and large begins in Numbers chapter 16. And here we get a not so good story about Korah himself, the patriarch of the family. And Korah, for a little bit of context, he is the first cousin to Moses and Aaron. Now, while I don't want to impute motive, the Bible's not expressly clear on all the things that were going through Korah's mind in this moment. We can kind of extrapolate some of the feelings that he might have felt when we realize the circumstances surrounding what he did. This section is not called Korah's Rebellion for no reason, and typically when people do big things like rebel, we want to know why. And like I said, I can't know for certain what was in his mind specifically, but there are just some human tendencies and things that we can relate to and say, yeah, I can understand that making me feel this way too. So Korah is the first cousin of Moses and Aaron, and you can see that, that would come with a certain level of status. You would feel pretty good about that when you notice your family is separated out as you are part of the Levites. You're separated out for work at the tabernacle. You're thinking, man, this is really good. God is calling us to some wonderful things. But then you see Moses and Aaron, people who you seem to know pretty well, and they're going in and out of the tabernacle. They're communicating with God. There are rituals being done to them. And then your service ends up being like grunt work, like, hey, why don't you stand guard over there? Why don't you kind of guard the entrance and make sure we only have so many people coming in and out at one time into the tabernacle complex? Why don't you take care of like tearing things down and setting things back up for us? That doesn't feel as special. That doesn't feel as lifted up. It doesn't feel like eyes are on you. You're just sweating and kind of breaking your back doing all this hard work, and you're thinking, when is my time coming? So potentially this is on Korah's mind as he sees Moses, Aaron, and their family members kind of partaking of the high priesthood and as spokesperson for God in Moses' case. And then your family is just kind of the people doing the grunt work. And even not just the grunt work, but the grunt work on the outskirts of the tabernacle complex itself. You're not even allowed to go really much further than just that. So you're barely included at all because Korah's main work was to be gatekeepers at the temple. And so you can see some sort of frustration here. And Korah says to Moses and Aaron, you guys are taking too much on yourselves. You guys are lifting yourselves up. He's not seeing that God is asking them to do the things that he wants them to do. He's just saying, my family's been kind of kicked to the side and I'm close to you. We're family. What happened to that? And he's saying, you took too much on yourself. And Moses says, do you desire the priesthood? Is that what this is all about? And so we get some clues there as well. And this amazing thing happens where, the authority of Moses and Aaron is tested by Korah. And Moses says, all right, let's have a test. Bring out censers and we will kind of offer incense before God and we'll see who he respects and who he doesn't. And basically, some people that are with Korah refuse. They're like, we're not even going to take part in your test. That's how little we think of your authority. We're not going to, submit ourselves to some test that you put forward and then like lose by the things that are your standards because we already don't respect you in this role. So why would we go about and do that? And Moses is pretty mad about it. And God says, let me at them, let me completely destroy them. So Moses says, all right, everybody who is with us, step back from Korah and from his family and from those who are with Korah and his family, because God is going to do a thing. And if God doesn't do a thing, if God does not judge these people, but lets them live on and live their lives, then you can know that he has not sent me. But if instead God kills them in a unique way in judgment, then we know that God has sent me to do this thing and that Korah is acting presumptuously and rebelliously. And sure enough, the people step back from Korah and those other dissenters, and the earth opens up and swallows them whole, which in my very analytical brain, I know this is a miracle that's happening, but in my analytical brain, I can kind of think, okay, I can see an earthquake potentially like shaking the ground and cracking this big fissure open and them falling in, but it also says the earth went back together and covered them up. And that part, I just simply don't really know how to explain. That's a really bizarre thing that happened. So that seemingly is the end of Korah, the end of the rebellion, and all the families that were with the dissenters are also buried in the earth. But then in Numbers 26, verse 11, we get a really interesting thing that happens. Moses demands that a census is taken of all of Israel, and within that census, we see that there are sons of Korah present and accounted for who did not die. Now again, with them not being the main part of the story, it doesn't tell us what happened between, Korah and these sons of Korah. How did they escape the fate? But we have to understand that while it doesn't say it explicitly, it does say that all those who stood with Korah in his rebellion were swallowed up by the earth, which means if there are sons of Korah left, it means they must have separated themselves from their father. And so it says the children of Korah did not die, which means that they must have looked at what their father was doing and thought, I can't be a part of this. I have to go with Moses and Aaron because I think that's what God is doing. And I want to take a minute to appreciate just how hard that would have been to do. I mean, we can follow our families into some really ridiculous things because that's our family. We have an innate sense of wanting to defend them, especially in Israel where they have this command to honor your father and mother. That's a really hard thing when that command butts up against like being respectful towards God, because that takes priority, that takes precedence. And actually, being honorable towards God is being honorable towards your family, even when it doesn't feel that way, when your family's kind of going against him, you are still carrying their name in a really good way. And I think the children of Korah do this. They honor Korah by rebelling against him and going with Moses and Aaron. Even though it seems like, they would have been conflicted, their hearts would have been torn in this moment, but they chose correctly and they are spared, which also shows God's mercy. He does not judge the children for the sins of the father, and I think that's a beautiful reminder of God. Now, as we continue the story of the Old Testament, we get little pepperings here and there of the story of the sons of Korah and what became of them. In 1 Chronicles 9, verse 17 to 21, we kind of are told what Korah and his family were supposed to be doing, what their roles had been. It says Korah's family had been gatekeepers since the time in the wilderness. It says that Phinehas was over the sons of Korah as they were gatekeepers of the tabernacle, which I think is interesting. Phinehas is the grandson of Aaron. So potentially this also plays into why Korah would have felt so slighted in this moment. Like, yes, okay, Moses and Aaron, I get it. They're a little bit high up. I understand that he's the high priest, but what about for me? And then they're told, oh, well, like a grandson of Aaron, someone younger than you is going to come and be over the work that you're supposed to do. He's going to make sure you're doing a good job. And that is a hard thing for an older person to take. Just age alone is hard when a younger person is over an older person. That's difficult. That's a difficult dynamic, but it's one that is set up in this moment. But also when you have Korah being so close, being a cousin to Aaron and Moses, and instead seeing it go genealogically on past him, this role of importance, he's thinking, man, I'm just really being skipped over completely. So potentially this added to the pride of Korah, or at least the frustration that Korah was feeling. But here we're told that they were supposed to be gatekeepers all the way back in that wilderness time. And in 1 Chronicles 9, we're also told that they continued to be gatekeepers after this time. So yes, Korah and his rebellion are crushed, but the sons of Korah, are able to continue to be gatekeepers. And we see this in 1 Chronicles 9, verses 22 through 25, that they had been gatekeepers and they will continue to be gatekeepers. And then when David kind of sets up, this order around the Ark of the Covenant, which gets brought back into Jerusalem, then he's like, okay, we got to set things up so that we have this tabernacle complex set and ready. And he replaces the sons of Korah in those roles. And he even recommends to Solomon, who takes over after him, these guys should keep on doing this because it's what they've been doing. It's what God assigned them to do. And I think there's a really interesting lesson here for churches that I just want to mention really quickly. I think it's really easy to kind of dismiss people, even though we'll say, yes, you don't want to judge somebody for the sins of their parents. It is really easy to dismiss people based on their surrounding circumstances. We have this idea that you are guilty by association. That's kind of like an American idea anyways. I have been the product of that. And it's not ideal. We know that it's not like how things are supposed to be, but out of safety, out of a desire for safety, we do still kind of act this way, where it's like, okay, well, you're a little bit too close to that thing that's not safe, and so we would like to just, for safety's sake, we're not blaming you, we're not judging you, we're not upset with you, but we would like to, for safety's sake or appearance's sake, remove you from this thing because it might be better and nobody's going to raise their eyebrows or start asking questions. And I think this is wrong. It's pretty impressive of Israel that they were able to look at the sons of Korah and say, you can keep on doing the job you were supposed to be doing, instead of removing them from it, thinking, maybe you're going to start thinking that you need to follow in Korah's footsteps. Maybe you're going to start thinking that, you're mightier than your position is kind of indicating that you are. But they don't do this. Instead, they say, okay, you chose the right action. You separated yourself from your family who's doing an evil thing, and you chose to follow God by following Moses and Aaron, his elected representatives. And so I think that it's a really, good point of consideration to look at Israel and say, good job, guys. You had a lot of screw-ups, but you did not screw up with the sons of Korah. You looked at them and valued them and did not judge them for the circumstances surrounding them. You realized that those circumstances were just surrounding them, but they were not their circumstances. And I think that's a really hard thing for us to do, but it's a lesson we can take. So often the lessons we want to take from ancient Israel are like, oh, look at how they sinned. This is actually something I think they do really well that we could learn from. So just in our own churches, yes, it could be tempting to, remove someone from a certain position or kind of not pay such close attention to somebody or not grant them opportunities for certain roles because of their surrounding circumstances. But I think we need to recognize when it is not their circumstances and not judge them in that way, and not worry so much about what others might think or how it might appear, if it's truly just a good thing that this person would fit this role really well. Like the sons of Korah fit the role of gatekeeper really well, and they were able to continue doing that thing. So just a side lesson for churches, but let's continue on with the sons of Korah. In Psalm 84, which is a psalm of the sons of Korah, we actually have a number of psalms that follow after this. They're called the Sons of Korah Psalms. And in Psalm 84, we get this beautiful psalm. I actually talked about it in a video a couple weeks ago about the house of God. So if you want to go check out that one, I thought that one had some good points about this psalm as well. But this son of Korah is in this position of gatekeeper during the time of David and Solomon, and he writes this about the house of God. Now remember, they are gatekeepers. They are not dealing in the tabernacle or temple itself. They had a number of responsibilities. Some of that included even baking the bread, like the showbread, that would be brought into the tabernacle or temple, but they couldn't actually go in there themselves. That wasn't their role. They had to remain on the outskirts and just kind of look at everybody going in and out. They had to open the door for those who were going in and out, but they couldn't actually get there themselves. And so while they do have position, they do have authority, they do have some measure of respect, they are still Levites, and they're still in the service of the tabernacle and temple. They are so close but so far. And sometimes that's the thing that actually feels worse, where it's like, I was so close to first place, but I fell just short. That loss almost feels worse than if you came dead last. But these sons of Korah had to wrestle with this every single day. And here are their thoughts on it in Psalm 84. He says, "How lovely is your house, O God," or "How lovely are your dwellings." I'm going to paraphrase here a little bit. And he says, "My soul longs and faints for the courts of the Lord. I want to be there with you. I want to go inside. I want to dwell there. Look, the birds have found a home there, but I'm not allowed in. So he's mourning this idea. And I think it's interesting that he has not lost the passion of Korah. Throughout all his generations, the desire of the sons of Korah, and I think of Korah, were the same. We want proximity to God, but the attitude is different behind it. The passion is the same, the attitude is different. Korah wants to elevate himself. He's thinking, how are you guys putting all this on yourselves? How are you taking this authority for yourselves? I want that. I've been passed over. My pride has been hurt. These people, these sons of Korah, generations later, are saying, I still long to be in position where I can enter the courts of the Lord. I still long for the house of God. I want to be inside, but alas, I'm stuck here on the outside. I have to serve from the outside because that's where God has placed me. But at the end of this psalm, we see just how drastically the attitude has changed in this family, because they say they're content to be doorkeepers in the house of God rather than to dwell in tents of wickedness. Yes, they see their ancestor Korah, who desired to dwell in the house of God, desired to go in and out before God, desired to have position and prestige and power, and they saw that that might be a good thing with the right attitude, but that he was desiring to dwell in the houses of wickedness. The houses of wickedness will open up. Absolutely, you're welcome there. They will accept as many as possible. There are certain verses that talk about like the grave is never filled, or wickedness is always hungry. And I love that imagery, because it's like it could just always continue to devour people. So yeah, if you're wanting to dwell somewhere, the tents of wickedness will always be open to you. There's no chance you get kicked out. You will be given a seat of honor in the house of wickedness. But that's not what the sons of Korah want. They say, I'm happier here on the outskirts of the tabernacle, because at least it's closer to you than the tents of wickedness would be. Sure, over there I'd be accepted. Sure, over there I'd have a place of power. I might seek my own gain. I might elevate myself to some unreasonable height, and that might feel good on human terms, but no. Here, yes, I might have the honor of serving your tabernacle and temple, but I'm always going to have to deal with this dichotomy inside of me where I want to be closer, but my lot is here at the gates. But what they end with, that I think is really amazing in this psalm, is they say, no good will be withheld from those who follow after God. And so it's almost like the son of Korah here is saying, I know that at some point you are going to bring me in. You are going to call me in from the gates and say, hey, now's the time. No good thing is going to be withheld from those who obey God, who follow after him. And this son of Korah represents a complete attitude change from Korah all those years back in Numbers chapter 16. In 2 Kings 25, we get a really interesting story as well. That's kind of a sad conclusion for the sons of Korah, but I think it's poetically very beautiful. We get this story about the overthrow of Jerusalem by Babylon, and it says this in verse 18, and the captain of the guard took Sariah the chief priest, and Zephaniah the second priest, and the 3 keepers of the threshold. These are the gatekeepers, and the enemy came and took them away, along with the high priest and the priest underneath him. There was no delineation in his mind between the person who stood at the door and the person who served in the inner courts. And the same is true for us. The enemy wants all of us. To the enemy, when we are even remotely proximal to God, we are a threat to him. To Babylon, the doorkeeper needed to be taken down as much as the high priest did, and that's what he did. And so you did, in the end, have this elevation of the status of doorkeeper, though not in a way that Korah ever expected. He wanted to lift himself up to greater heights. He wanted to be seen by the people as something respected and honored. And the job of doorkeeper just didn't have that for a really long time. Interestingly, as we follow this story of the sons of Korah, and their attitude shifts completely away from what Korah's was into one of appreciation for where God has placed them, appreciation for their proximity to God, even as they still struggle with desiring to be closer to Him. They know that God will bring them closer. They know that their role is something that's valuable, that God desires them to be doing. And in the end, the role of doorkeeper does get elevated, because when Babylon comes to take all the people away, the first ones they deal with are the high priests as well as the doorkeepers.